Hi, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to start on the track width extension on the sides. So what I've done for the time being is put the spacer on I'm going to use. I've removed the spring and then put a jack underneath the lower arm to push it up to the rough sort of rod height I'm planning on running, so I can take a measurement. Probably a little bit lower than it will be when it's finished, but it's the best way to get a more accurate idea. As you can see, it sits well inside the arch. So measure from the tyre to the edge of the lip, 70mm in the lower arm. What I'm going to do is extend the bottom lower arm more than the top lower arm to create a little bit of camber as well. So the next thing I need to do is get the car level so I can put a camber gauge on the brake disc, figure out what the camber is as standard, and then figure out how much the upper arm needs to be shorter than the lower arm to give around 4 degrees of camber is the target. So this is not an exact art for me anyway. It should be. There are loads of better ways of doing this, but with the tools and equipment I've got available to me, this is the way I have to muddle through. So what I've done, I've put a level across just on top of the wings. I have measured down from the level to the suspension turret to make sure that the wings are sitting in the correct position, and that's close enough. And I've set the level. I've put a jack underneath one car and set the spirit level in the centre so the car is level. Then a jack under the suspension arm, balanced on a lump hammer, that's all I had available to me. By putting the suspension arm in the level position, that sets all the alignment to a kind of neutral position. The alignment changes through the suspension travel, so by having the arm level, that gives a good base point to begin from. Again, cheap tools. Bought this from eBay, God, years ago now. It's just a cheap camber measuring tool, and it works okay. I mean, again, not an exact art, but it's enough to make sure both sides are the same, which is all you really need at the end of the day. So to set this, again, because it's a cheap tool, find something level with the spirit level. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this one-handed. Put the camber gauge on the spirit level and then set it to 0 before you start, and that gives the correct reading. I just have to put this down for a second while I actually set the gauge. So now the gauge is correctly calibrated, it's showing around 2.5 degrees of camber. The difference in extensions from top to bottom depends upon the pivot point. So the pivot point will be the centre of the hub. It's quite a distance to the top compared with the bottom from that centre point. So what I have to do is basically put a straight edge on the disc, pivot the straight edge with the camber gauge on it until it shows 4 degrees, and then measure the difference between the top and the bottom before and afterwards to figure out how much extra I need in the lower arm as opposed to the top arm to end up with the target of 4 degrees camber. Sounds complicated, fairly simple. Again, there's probably a million ways to do this that would be better, more accurate, but these are the tools I've got, so this is the way I have to do things. And to be fair, I've done this plenty of times. Probably, I think I made about 7 lock kits with arm extensions, and they've always ended up on target or thereabouts. They always feel okay to drive on. This is the first stage. Once the arm extensions are in, I can then set about seeing how much clearance there is, how much I can either extend the pivot on the bottom to give more steering angle, or slice down the knuckles with a little bit of Ackerman correction to give it some more steering angle. But I always do the arm extensions first, because then you can see exactly what you've got before you start messing around with the hubs. So that's the upper and lower arms off. With these, for the lower arm, suspension pivot needs to remain the same. So slice around here, then a piece of CDS tube to extend, and then weld this back on the end again. The upper arm is best to do on the inner edge, because that's the area where it's straightest and thickest as well, so you can get the most weld around that area, and then just extend it out. You can fill this section in here to give it some extra strength and weld it all back together again. So fairly straightforward really. These are pretty much identical to the IS250 arms I did recently, so it's quite familiar, to be honest. Let's crack on. Arms are all cut down. I've put a little grind slit in both sections there, so I'll just make sure when it comes out and get the orientation correct, so this angle here stays the same. It is pretty much the same as the Lexus I did recently. Just had to grind the weld around the outside where that's joined, and it came away fairly easily. I've removed the anti-roll bar mount. I never run anti-roll bars on drift cars. I find it makes them way less stable. The rear end has more grip without the front end, they just get in the way. So cut that out of the way. That makes life a little bit easier just to get around to weld and cut and everything else. So that's now gone. Won't be a problem with clearance either now. It isn't there too. So yeah, find some pieces of steel, cut them to size and weld it all back together again. Everything's cut down and cleaned up, ready for welding. With the upper arm, it's got this little plate. Slot in and weld onto that section. This over the top and weld that onto there. I'll plate the sides in, give it some extra strength at a later date, but for the time being just get it all mocked up so I can bolt it on the car and check that the intended width is correct. This has actually worked out better than the Lexus I did recently. The Lexus, the CDS just welded directly on the front with some gussets to reinforce it. With this, the hole is big enough so it slides all the way in up to a lip at the bottom there. I've drilled out the underside so I can get some nice pull welds in there. I think what I'll probably do is cut open the front of the arm so I can get a bead of weld all the way along the bottom as well. That'll save any requirements for any gusseting. That'll be really strong. And then just this on the end. Obviously I'll put some gussets on that section just to reinforce, but it's coming together quite nicely. So that's the arm extensions mocked up. Not the prettiest welds in the world. My mask is horrendous at the moment. I can't see anything out of it. The screen is all scratched. But just some temporary welds just to hold it in position for now while I bottle them all back to the car. Make sure everything fits the way it should. The track width is where I want it, and then I can tidy the welds up, put some gussets in, play up the sides, make sure they're nice and strong, and then paint them. The general sort of idea, I'm going to be aiming for 4 degrees of camber, 4 degrees of caster, and as close to 0 Ackerman as possible. It's not always possible to get it to 0, depending on where the knuckle sits in comparison with the disc and everything. I've had to push them out that far in the past that the track rod end actually touches the disc almost. So yeah, that's the basic idea. The reason for this, the 4 degrees of camber kind of cancels out the 4 degrees of caster on lock. So as the wheel goes through its sort of travel, the wheel flattens off as you go onto lock. So when you're on full lock, you've got almost a flat contact patch with the ground. The camber makes the turning a little bit sharper, and obviously you don't need quite so much grip, quite such a large contact patch while you're going straight. When you flick the car sideways, the wheel wants to be flat, so it sort of pulls it onto lock as well. It seems to be, that's what I've always aimed for in the past, and seems to work well for me anyway with the sort of style of driving I have. So that's the target, and we'll see how close we can get to that. So everything's bolted back in position again, just temporarily. Everything just finger tight with my lump hammer under there so the suspension arm sits level. And we'll just check the final camber position to see if we've ended up anywhere near target. I'll just let that settle. Looks like just under 4 degrees. So, like I said, it's not an exact art. As long as it's there or thereabouts, and the other side is identical when I finished, then that's good enough. I'm quite pleased with that. So we'll pop the wheel back on and the spacer, just to see how that works with the arch. I'll have to put the arch back on as well. A little bit difficult with that track rod arm attached because the hub keeps moving around. But they need extending before they can go back on. With the arch in position, actually got a little bit more poke there than I'd planned. I think that'll be okay. I'm not going to run the car right into the wheel arches, if that makes sense. It's, they should tuck a little bit when they ride up anyway. Pop that jack up a little bit more. Hold that now. Well, it's certainly going to look aggressive. Yeah, I'm happy with that. If I do find it's too much, I can always drop down the spacer size, or even go to a 215 tyre. So yeah, that'll be good. So that's the first side mocked up. I'm happy with the overall results. And then I now need to take the other side to bits and duplicate what I've done this side on the other side, and reinforce everything, gussets in, strengthen, finish off the weld, and then it can be bolted together and move on to the next stage, which is the actual steering angle itself. Just for reference, that is how much wider than it is than standard. I mean, there's a nice bit of poke on there, should create some really good clearance in the arch wells for some steering angle. And that's what it's all about really at the end of the day. Fill the arches and create the space in the arch wells so we can give it loads of steering angle. If I can just drop this down a little bit. So as you can see, there's tons of clearance everywhere off the back of the wheel. I mean, we're going to hit the track rod arm before we hit anything else when it comes to creating more angle. So that's about as good as it really gets. On the front side, hitting the spring mount at the top there. But I mean, that is tons. Absolute overkill. So if I can get anywhere near that, I'll be very happy. The other way. So that's the difficult bit done. The clearance is made. I probably won't record the doing the other side. I'll do a little summary of once all the arms have been welded up, and the finished result once they've been painted and everything. And the next video will be creating the actual steering angle itself. With this car, I think I mentioned in a previous video, there's a pivot that comes off the end of the steering box. It might just be a case that I can extend that to create more travel, rather than your sort of standard knuckle chop. Having said that, I want to correct the Ackerman as well, so depending on where that ends up, it might require a knuckle chop. So we'll see how we go when we get to that stage anyway. But yeah, please like, comment and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video.